as Retooling the faculty for Rebooting Legal Education. Today I have with me, I'm Greg Clinton, I'm Director of IT at NCCU School of Law in Durham. Today I have some of my colleagues from Durham and the Raleigh area. I got Wayne Miller, who's my counterpart at Duke, he's here. And I have Mark from Campbell, who's here. And then I have my parts of my team here, David Lancaster, who's on our IT team. And then I have Pam Williams, who's in the audience, who just started an initiative for us. She taught our first distance learning course this past summer session. And then presenting, we'll have one of our senior professors, Jim Beckwith. And Jim, when I first met Jim in 1998, in my interview, Jim said, and I quote, I have been using WordPerfect 5.1 all these years. It's not broke, and I don't want you to fix it. And I'm okay with that. So, however, over the period of time, when we did our first classroom in 2002, after spending $300,000 on upgrading the classroom, Jim's comment was, show is fancy. But then one weekend we got together and he used the classroom and he was using it, and then the light bulb went off. And from that point on, I didn't have to say another word about technology at the law school. So Jim's been our biggest supporter, and he's been at the forefront of trying technology. But also, he's been reluctant about some technology that doesn't make sense for him. And he'll talk with you extensively. This session last year we presented based on faculties as partners in technology. Jim didn't get an opportunity to speak an extended period of time, and we want this year to give you all more an opportunity to hear what Jim has to say. So Jim would be the second speaker. April will be the first speaker. April is a young professor. She's been at law school about 4 years. She's assistant professor. She's adapts to technology very well, and she'll talk about the technology she uses in her class, how she uses it, and why she uses it. At the law school, so let me talk to you a little bit about our environment. Our environment, as you see Jim posted there on the corner, we have about three types of rooms in general. We have a room that has like room 100, which is the top shot, where you have a plasma overlay to the side where the professor can write on and images are projected on the screen. The professor has a wireless microphone or lavalier on, so he's always in contact with the audience. The second type room is a room with a symposium in, which is the room Jim is sitting in. The symposium is at the table, where it's a smaller smart board where you write on the symposium and the items are projected. And then the third type room is at the lower right, which is where students are studying. That's one of our seminar rooms with rear-end projection smart board capabilities. All of our rooms have video conferencing capability, teleconferencing, DVD, cable, and what am I missing? I think that's about it. A computer connected to the internet. And then this room we just built last year is our group study room, where what we noticed five weeks before finals we go 24 hours a day. And because our facilities are not that large, we've opened up our classrooms so students can study within the classroom. We noticed that the students were using the technology in the classroom to study. So we decided to scale that down into the breakout space, room about 10 by 10, where we use the same technology in those rooms. As you can see, there's a plasma at the end of the table, and all the students have laptops. Embedded in the table are VGA cables where students can attach their laptops to the display, and there's a control button on the table where they can punch the button to put what they're working on the display. There's a symposium in the room so they can do annotations as well. That's generally our environment. This is a new room we just created, which we think is the room of the future. In this room, we have the same type presentation technology in the room that we have in all the classrooms, but we have 2 HD plasma screens, 52 inches, that sit on the wall. The room is approximately maybe 10 by 10, so it's a small room. The professor sits at the table, or we have an extra piece of furniture so if the professor wants to stand and teach, the person can do that as well. The professor, as opposed to teaching to the classroom like we're talking now, or presenting before the classroom, the professor is teaching to the plasma screens. Because, I just forgot to put that on all of them. The professor is teaching to a screen that allows for 32 individual inputs. So 32 students can be on 16 on each screen. Each student sees the professor sees the student. The students also see each other up to 16. Whoever is speaking at the time is highlighted. And that screen, let's see. That's that screen. So you'll see, in this case, there's like 9 people on this screen and 9 on the other screen. Now, let me go back here and just make this a steel piece. Well, let's see. And on this screen, you'll see the faculty using technology. In 2005, we started with, that's when we actually started tracking faculty using technology. Now we're up to about 95% of the faculty using technology, which the things that we use exam software for first year students. 1 year that diminished because some of the upper level students, well, some of the upper level classes, professors were given take-home exams, so we didn't use exam software for the upper level classes, so our percentage went down. However, for all our first year students now, we have 100% all professors using exam software for first year students. The PowerPoint usage, as you can see, fluctuate. In 1 year, in 2007, went down to 47%. A lot of professors decided they didn't want to use PowerPoint in that year. Clickers have not been successful for us as a whole. Now, Ava's going to talk about clickers in her environment, but they've been pretty good for her. With clickers, we've only gotten up to a 14% penetration. Last year, we got 15% penetration, but then we went down because one of the professors who used it didn't like it. We typically try to get the professors involved in all our technology decisions. We actually bring technology to the table and introduce it to the professor, but we let the professor make the decision how they want to use it and then develop or decide upon the applications for that. One of the things that makes us successful in this arena is that, as David Lancaster would say, we try to Fisher price everything. We try to make it easy. Anybody should be able to walk in our room and just use it without having any instructions. It should be intuitive, similar to your environment on a Mac or on a Windows environment. Asynchronous, we just started with our first course, as I mentioned that. Professors in the corner, these are all our full-time professors, and that's the percentages we're tracking. Laptops and the tablets were something we came up with years ago that we really thought was a great idea, and we introduced it because we thought it would be great for the writing professors to grade their written stuff and to annotate and then send it back to students. It didn't go anywhere. It just died. But then a professor discovered it this year, and now it's been revived. So we'll see that in the fall. We'll see more professors using tablets. With that said, I think that I'm going to turn it over to Jim. No, I'll turn it over to April.
Hello. Hello. So I'm Nicole Dawson. So I've been teaching at North Carolina Central for 4 years, my first teaching job. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself just because I think it's relevant. My undergraduate degree is in computer science, and I worked as a programmer many, many years ago, although my knowledge is now obsolete, and I don't even attempt to do any networking or messing with cables at all. So it's wonderful that we've got such a great IT staff. So I'm inclined to use technology. But the reason that I use it so much, and I'll go through all the different things that I use in helping to educate our students, the reason that I think I've been so successful is because our IT department is so supportive, so encouraging, and we really have a wonderful visionary with Greg. I mean, he's very forward-thinking. He's always asking us what it is that we want to do, how they can help us, and so it's because we have that cooperative, supportive environment that I'm able to do what I can do, and it's a lot of fun as well. So what I'm going to talk about is what I do in terms of technology, how I use the technology, and why I use the technology. Before I begin, how many folks are law professors? Okay, so wow, not as many as I thought. So, and the other folk are IT people? Okay.
Librarians.
Oh, and librarians. Okay, okay, all right. Well, for the law professors, how many of you use currently technology? Okay.
That's why we're here.
Okay. Well, some people may be here because they're interested in, what can they? Does it actually work? Not all our professors are on board with that, right?
No, but just here at this conference.
Okay.
I'll
give you that. All right. And well, for law professors, you may get some ideas in terms of what I do with my class. For those of you who are IT professionals, librarians, one of the reasons why I'm focusing on why I do it, I think one of the things that you have to do is to be able to sell the technology to the faculty. And faculty aren't going to just use technology because it's there, right? There's got to be some real good pedagogical reason why it is that you're going to use that. So let's see. Since this is a CALI conference, I'll start with CALI. So I do encourage my students to use the CALI lessons. I teach torts, constitutional law, and a Supreme Court seminar. So for my torts class, I have an extra credit assignment, and I will give my students 5 points on the midterm, which is a 15-point midterm, if they do, I think it's about maybe 12 CALI lessons. And the midterm is maxed out at 15. So if you score 12 on the midterm and you've done the extra credit, you still only get the 15. So there's a strong incentive to do it because if you struggle with the midterm, if you get, 5 on the midterm, you're still not out of play if you've done the extra credit assignment. So that's how I use the CALI lessons. The why, I do it because it's a free resource. It's a wonderful resource. Students won't go to it. For some reason, they want to pay money for something because they think they'll find the golden key to, how to succeed in torts. And so if you tie some incentive to it, they'll actually look at it. Students have come back to me and said CALI was very helpful for them, not only in torts, but then they use it for their other classes as well. And so I've gotten a lot of good feedback with them being exposed to CALI and, of course, having those extra credit points on the midterm. All right, so the other thing that I use, and I'm one of very few professors at our school who uses the clickers. And I have been using clickers for 3 years, I think, and I've been teaching for 4. So that first year that I taught, Greg had actually brought in the clickers, and so I kind of helped out with getting it up to speed. But at the end of my first year, my review session, we tried to use the clickers, and so I was introducing the students to them at that time, and I was becoming familiar with them. And the way I use the clickers, I use it just for my torts class, my 1L class. Very conducive for, a class where it's element driven. What is a battery? Is this tort satisfied? So, so in my class, got my normal discussion, right on the symposium. We have discussion, and then after, I feel like I've covered the material to the point where the student should be able to answer a multiple choice question. I put up a multiple choice question. I give them, when we first start using the clickers, I give them about 2 minutes. And, they're clicking away. And then I get the results. And you can see see over on the far left the little pie chart, and it shows you for this particular question, there was mass confusion in the class because it's 4 multiple choice answers, and it was almost divided by a fourth. So when I saw that result, it was a clue to me that I had not done as good of a job as I should have on that particular concept, which was wonderful because I would rather know, early, and they certainly would rather know, sooner rather than later. So I backed up. We went over it again. We went through this particular question. We went through the answer choices. And at the end of that process, I think we were all on the same page. So it was incredibly beneficial for me as a professor to make sure that the class was where I thought they were at, and also for the students because they can also do self-assessment. So they know as well where they fit in terms of their understanding. So this was another question in another class period, and you can see the majority of the class got the answer right. And you have a few students who chose incorrect answers. Now when the pie chart looks like this, I don't spend a whole lot of time on it because the majority of the class has it. But those students who got the answer wrong, well, they know that, 80% of the class got it right. I got it wrong. Maybe I need to do something else in terms of my studying and my preparation. So that's very good as well. So they appreciate the assessment. The other reason why I use clickers, aside from the information that we're getting, this immediate information, is it helps to break up the class. So whenever you're doing the Socratic method and you're, maybe you're able to get to 3 students in a class period, in a 50-minute class period, and the other students, while they may be taking notes, they're not as engaged as you would like them to be. Well, once I say a clicker question is coming up, and they actually look forward to it. I have maybe 2 to 3 clicker questions per class, and they look forward to it. And so with the clickers, everyone is able to participate and to be involved. And then what I'll oftentimes do is I'll say, well, if, someone who chose C, raise your hand and explain to the class why you chose C. So that gives an opportunity for other students to participate as well. My first-year students absolutely love the clickers. I attempted to use the clickers in the fall of last year when I taught common law for the first time, and it didn't really work. That's a different type of course. And so I think if you teach a course that is very element-driven, clickers can be really helpful. It's just not going to work in common law, and I think that's okay. I mean, I think the thing about technology is you have to figure out, is it going to work? Is it going to be helpful for what it is that you're going to do? If it's not, that's okay. And I don't think everyone needs to use clickers, even those other torts professors. The other thing I think is that in terms of using technology, you have to use what works for you, and you never want to try and be something that you're not. So if you're not comfortable with the technology, I don't think any professor should feel forced to use it. All right, so the other thing that I do is I have all of my classes, all of my doctrinal classes, so my torts classes are captured and my constitutional law classes are captured. I teach a seminar class as well. I don't worry about having that recorded. And so basically how do we do it? We just, they are captured and the students can go to the Panopto site. So students are given instructions by the wonderful IT folk, and so they know how to get to it. And they can view it throughout the semester. When Greg showed that one screen of the study room, so the students have access when they study to have a screen, and they can always go, whether they can reach me or not, and go to a particular class, have their questions answered. I just think it's a wonderful tool for them to be able to have access to. One of the reasons why I captured this particular slide, we were going over a pretty complex statutory provision, North Carolina statutory provision, and I know the students did not get it with just that one class. There's just no way you can. I mean, even as lawyers, we need to read these statutes 1 or 2 or 3 times. And so for the students, and I tell them if you don't have it right now, that's okay. That's kind of to be expected. You can go back and look at the captured video again. So they really appreciate that. I think I've got pretty good usage. The top student in my class for both semesters last year said he reviewed every single one of my captured videos. And so, it's no surprise that he actually was one of the top students, or the top student. Okay, so I also use Skype. And if you look at Friday, right? We are required to have 10 hours of office hours a week at Central, which is a lot. And Friday I have from 10 to 11 via Skype, so I can stay home on Friday. So I don't teach a class on Friday, but I still want to be available to my students. So I use it that way. I also use it when I am conferencing with students, like if we're going over a paper, so my seminar students. If they need to talk with me, I've got a small seminar class, so I don't mind letting them know that you can Skype me if I happen to be on and you've got a question. I'm not going to do that for my 61L students or my 75 CALI students, but I'll do it for the small seminar students. The other thing that I will do with Skype, I was teaching a summer program, and the students had a test on Friday, and it was on Thursday, and I had to leave early on Thursday because it was early release, and the kids are out, and so I've got to leave to pick up the kids. But I knew they wanted to talk with me before the exam on Friday. So on Thursday morning, I called Brian Schreiner, who's one of our other wonderful IT people, and said, can you set up one of the seminar rooms with Skype so that the students, because some of them didn't have Skype, the students just could go into the seminar room and I would be online and they could just sit down and we could have our, I could answer their questions. So that worked out wonderfully, and as it happened, I wound up having like a room full of 7 students, and they were all asking questions, and we kind of had like a study session. So I'm a big proponent of Skype. I think it certainly serves a purpose. There was, in one of the sessions that I was in, there was a question about Skype over Polycom, and I think that they serve different purposes, and so sometimes Skype is wholly appropriate. And in this situation, when I use it for office hours or for conferences or for study sessions, it's absolutely fine. I've also used Skype and logged me in to teach classes. And so this next picture is of San Diego, because the first time that I did that, where I actually taught my class remotely using Skype and logged me in, I was in San Diego at a conference in San Diego. My class was a 9 o'clock torts class, and so I was actually up at 6 a.m. teaching my torts class. And so I have a Mac, and so the Mac I use to go ahead and sign in via Skype. My tablet, I use Log Me In, and so I was actually using remotely the computer in the classroom that I teach at, because I use PowerPoint and all that. So I was able to use that remotely, still communicate with the students. They actually thought it was pretty cool that we were able to do that at Central. So I have done that. I have taught maybe 3 of my torts classes. I have taught a seminar class when I've been away at conferences. And it's just nice to know that if you don't want to reschedule your class and you're able to teach your class, that you have that option. I don't like having the students having to rearrange their schedule. I like sticking to the schedule. So that's wonderful for me. The other option, of course, instead of teaching the class live, is to record a class in advance and then just tell the students, and I've done that as well. It's more difficult to record a class, to stand up there for 50 minutes and just talk to no one. So I like the option of being able to teach my class remotely. Okay, so I've also used Twitter. And this has been a lot of fun. So, all right, NCCU Law Moot Court. So I created this Twitter account, this particular one, when I was coaching 2 students who were participating in a moot court competition at Vanderbilt. And their spouses weren't able to come, and of course their mothers and their fathers and their aunties and their grandmothers, all wanted to know what Robbie and Mary Jane were doing. And so I told them I'd set up this Twitter account, and while they were participating in the competition, I was just, Twittering. And so these are my tweets when they were actually participating in the argument. And so the spouses and the moms and the dads were following, and they really, really appreciated it. And so I was also able to take pictures. So this is Robbie Dotson, one of our students, and the next student over is Mary Jane, and so I was able to take pictures of them and post them as well, and so that was a lot of fun. And the other way that I've used Twitter, I've taken students to Washington, D.C. to observe some Supreme Court arguments. I guess I've taken about 5 trips, and so I've created a Twitter account for that purpose as well, so the students can also tweet while they're standing in line at the court, while they're looking at different things, and so we'll send that link out to the law school community as a whole, so that they can follow us as well, the other faculty members. And that's, in terms of what I do, that's the technology that I use. I have Polycom up here because after talking with Pam about the class she taught this summer and talking with Greg, I've decided I'm going to try and teach a Supreme Court seminar online class over the summertime. So that's something hopefully I'll be able to do in the future. So that's it, and I'll reserve any questions for after Jim has spoken.
Oh, too much. Yeah.
All right, there I am in my spaceship. I call it the Starship Enterprise. That's classroom 202, the dual screening room. With the symposium, we also have classroom 100, which is a simpler version. It has a single screen. It's a side-mounted plasma board. And I'll talk about, there are differences, of course, as some of the panels at this conference have demonstrated. But much of what I'm going to say is in a short paper that's on the CALI website. It's a PDF file. You're welcome to download it. It's a work in progress because I already see that some parts of it are going to need to be changed because of what I've learned in the last few days. But my focus is best practices from the teacher's perspective on how to effectively use a smart classroom. And when we're talking about smart classrooms, we have to talk about space. What antecedent assumptions are we making about physical space? Because presumably before we go to virtual law school, you're going to be teaching in a space at a given time. People come to you, there you are together. And how do we maximize the goal of engaged teaching? And I'll talk about that because we have to make assumptions. What do you mean about engagement with students? Engaged law teaching doesn't take place in a vacuum. It takes place in spaces like those where I'm lucky enough to work. And how do students learn? Well, they learn by sight. And as you can see, I teach big classes. I've got contracts, I've got UCC. 2 years ago, I didn't cap one of my classes. I had 120 students, which I soon learned was not manageable. But the question of sight and what can technology do for you? What we've got in these rooms are the broadcast screens. And that makes such a huge difference because I remember teaching in pre-technological days where you have the problem of the detached back row. You've got people, and they won't even tell you, I can't see the board. I can't, as we'll talk later about sound, I can't hear what's going on in the room because you're in the back row. Either you choose to be back there or you got to class late and all the good seats up front were taken. Well, notice what the smart classroom can do for you in terms of remedying the problem of sight. We don't want anyone to be disadvantaged. We want to have this quality of access, and your wall-mounted screens are a wonderful device. We've got the two mounts in 202, the single mount in 100 is a drop-down. On 202, it's a permanent wall mount, and it makes such a difference. And of course, intimately related to the question of the screens is the lectern, which was so ably discussed just a few months ago regarding what was done at Villanova. And I learned a great deal about how lecterns, in many ways, are the most important aspect of your smart classroom. we have the smartboard. And the smartboard is such a wonderful thing for people who teach statutes. I teach Uniform Commercial Code. Now, the debate I have with some colleagues, do you want to use PowerPoint? I tend not to. What I do is I will load the Article 2 of the UCC into a Word file and project the file. If we're doing Battle of the Forms, and what do lawyers do? They practice law, they have a statute book on their desk, they work with the text. Well, you project 2207, big as life, it fills up the wall. You've got this maddeningly complex language for Battle of the Forms. Then I'm standing in front of the students, they see what's behind me, I can write on the symposium front ways, or if it's the side mount, I'm over here. There's the text. Now, what does that do to the question? You never get the comment, I left my coat in my locker. Could you repeat that, please? No, because there it is. You've got the text big as life, and then as you ask the question, does the second meaning of the word acceptance in 2207 mean the same thing as in the first? No, it doesn't. That's a quirk in the statute. But the point is, this mechanism brings engagement because it has this immediacy that they presumably would still have their UCCs, their statute books, but I think it's such an advantage to be able to, in real time, discuss, say, the statutory language. You've got it up there, and then as the discussion progresses, you can say, all right, Mr. Smith, does the second meaning of the word acceptance? You can circle the two words in question. They can see this is part of a statutory text. Students learning visually. And in using your overlay with your smartboard, of course, practical questions come up like maximization of the size of the type. You want to, there are techniques you can use in Windows to maximize, to fill up the space with the text. So you're not wasting white space on the side. You maximize the size of the language for student visual perception. You do have practical problems that come up like the angle of projection from you're going to have a ceiling mounted projection system. Now with in 100 there is a possibility that if you stand in the very middle of the room, you're going to block part of the screen. So sometimes you may have to stand off on the side and mark up the screen on your side board, knowing that what you see there is what they are seeing, and then you can talk, discuss what you're doing in real time. I teach big classes, but we do have all of our seminar rooms have smart boards, all of the devices, and I have evaluated professors teaching some of the smaller classes, and for example, our small business clinic, students were making presentations in one of the seminar rooms. Well, they know as much about using smart boards as faculty members do because they are making their presentations of advice given to, say, a church that needed legal advice, and you're working through the we take nonprofits as well as for-profits in our small business clinic. And so if you're utilizing your smart boards, you're going to have student use as well as faculty use. Now in terms of, you've got visual, what about sound? And I've heard a lot of discussion about microphones. Well, I have my own preferences, and virtue of the smart classroom is not only does it solve the problem of visual detachment, it also solves the problem of access to sound. That is, will every student hear everything that goes on in the classroom? Now, if you've got a smart classroom, you're going to have the possibility of a variety of technologies. You've got the possibility of ceiling microphones. If that works for you and you've got great acoustics in the room, then you don't need to be concerned about what I noted in the paper about various types of faculty microphones. But let's assume you're in an environment like mine where you do need these particular faculty microphones. On your lectern, you're going to have this kind of mic. Now, I pace, I get nervous. I can't sit still. I have to, as you can see, I can't sit there and talk to you. I have to do this. Now, if you are moving about in the classroom, then if all you've got is this, then you fade out. And you're back to the old pre-technological 1980s mode of you shout to reach the students in the back row. Well, if you supplement your podium microphone, well, what do you got faculty members using? I started with the lavalier clip-on method, which you put to your tie, which works well enough, but you've got to be aware of a big disadvantage, especially if you are recording your classes as we do with our Finocto system. If you have your lavalier mic and you are talking and everybody's fine, and then student says, "Professor, what about this?" And you go, "That is a very good question." Well, you've turned your head, the mic is still over here, and you may discover that on your recording, your voice is faded. And students are struggling. Well, what exactly was being said at that point? That's why I am never going to give this back as my reward for being a supporter of the technology staff. I was given the happy task of testing this wonderful mic for use in my classes last year. And it is absolutely great, because what happens is, as you talk, the mic moves with you. So you never have a fade out. And so if you can get your ear set microphone, if you're having to wire your faculty, I urge you to go with your ear set. You can easily mold it to the shape of the professor's head and have an optimal distance, and so that this little thing never moves. And if you're recording your classes, then everything that's said is archived, so you don't have a student saying, "On the video for the class at 2:45 yesterday, I couldn't hear because of a fade out." All right, so sight and sound. How can you transform your classroom visually? How can you transform your classroom by sound? That's the wonderful advantage that technology makes. Now, regarding student microphones, here you've got, well, this is a different one from one we had. You've got the flat-mounted mic on the desktop. Well, what happens when students come to class? They bring the uniform commercial code, boom, laptop, boom. All this stuff is going down. Well, what happens? They bump it, they cover it up. You're constantly, if you have sensitive desk-mounted mics, then it's a problem for you. Because I've gotten to the point where I turn them off. Because the interference is not worth the price. So there's a dilemma. How do you capture student comments or student questions in the exchange effectively? I have come to the view that it's probably desirable to go with a small gooseneck that rises above, a little bit above the clutter. But then I'm told that at another law school in our hometown, students play with goosenecks, either intentionally or just to have fun with them. So maybe it's just a constant struggle. How do you have optimal sound quality in your room? And that also includes the initial question of acoustic design, and then what do you do when you retrofit the room? And the microphone issue is intimately tied in to your archiving issue. Because if you go to a system of archiving classes, as we have done, then you want your video, the archive, to fully capture everything that is said. So that the professor has to be sensitive to the teaching techniques necessary in order to capture everything. For example, if you have silenced the student mics for various reasons, and you're asking a question, and you get where a student asks a question, then for the archive, repeat what the student's question was. Because if you don't repeat it, the mic didn't pick it up, and the students watching the archive will have a silent period. Well, what was being asked? And then here comes the discussion with an answer. So you've got to be sensitive to the interplay between your microphones and your recording technology. So that the goal is you want every student to have a full archive of every class, everything that was said, so that they can get the maximum benefit. Now, in terms of your smart classroom, we have smart boards, and they contain the smart notebook, the substitute for the whiteboard or the blackboard. I do not like using these things because they are spatially limited. Especially if you have a lot to write up there, then what do when you run out of space? You got to erase. Why don't you just have, or think how much better it is, if you've got a digital board, you're writing on it with your digital, looks sort of like this, a digital stylus. Now if you have the symposium model, you're talking to the students this way, you're writing on this, and what you write appears behind you. Or you got the wall mount, where you're over here and you write, and what you're writing appears up there. The point being that you're not limited in terms of storage capacity. Instead of having to erase or have a blackboard that's full, you simply hit the next function. Bump, 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 bump. And then you have a sequence of slides, if you will, of what you've written along the side, so that if in the first 5 minutes you had been discussing some matter of offer and acceptance, and then you were toward the end of the hour, you were talking about revocation of offers, and then a student says, well, what does that mean if, and they were referring back to an earlier discussion, you simply touch the relevant discussion and it comes back because it's been stored. So you've got this wonderful ability to sequentially store information, and you don't have to deal wasting class time by erasing so that you can start over with what's already a messy board. Now, question of archiving classes. There's a real interesting interplay here regarding archiving and how to do it well. You have the interaction between the archiving of the class and sound technology. You want to have microphones that capture everything so that in the archive the student doesn't miss anything. And one of the issues that came up today in a previous discussion was, is the archiving decision made by the faculty member? I was astonished that it's possible that the professor decides whether to archive the class at the lectern that day. It's a faculty decision. We will archive that day. Well, we don't do it that way. We have a central archiving. You talk to the IT department. You tell them, what do you want? I want all of my classes archived, and they handle it. It's not, I think it's maybe that if you're in an environment where there's a presumption against archiving, then it's the exception. So faculty member chooses to archive, hits the button, rather than have it, as our case, it's the other way around, that there's an assumption that archiving is not unnatural, so it's centralized with our IT department. Now, attitudes toward technology and laptops in the class and internet access in the class. I'm not afraid of internet access. I'm not going to try to take away student laptops. I think that an engaging, effective teacher has nothing to be afraid of from competition, from other temptations for a generation of multitasking students. As long as they're not distracting someone else. Now, of course, that raises the issue about web surfing and somebody sitting right next to you. But if you are not an effective teacher, banning laptops isn't going to solve your problem, because students have been doodling and daydreaming for hundreds of years. And I sometimes think that I associate complaints about technology and laptops and internet access with ineffective teaching. That the people who are not doing a good job have the most to fear, and they don't want to be confronted by the emptiness of what they do. So I take the view, embrace technology and use it to enhance what you're doing. Now, we talked about archiving, we've talked about smart boards, we've talked about, in terms of teaching and the use of technology, practice makes perfect. It's so essential that the use of technology in a classroom be unobtrusive. You don't want the students to know that you're using technology, because you want them to focus on the Adams v. Linsell and that acceptances are effective upon dispatch. You don't want them to be thinking about, what is he doing, struggling up there with that thing? Is the issue that the professor does or does not know how to use technology? Or is the issue, let's discuss offer and acceptance and the rule of Adams v. Linsell? You want it to be unobtrusive. You don't want the use or misuse of technology to intrude on the discussion. And of course, that means that faculty members end on time, so that the faculty member, particularly the tech-savvy faculty, can have time to set up, because you can't just start a class that's tech-heavy. You've got to have maybe 5 minutes to set up whatever software you might be using, if you've got a PowerPoint, whatever you're doing. It's so important that, and this is going to be faculty member versus faculty member, say, hey, look, will you finish on time, because I've got to set up. And if I can't set up, my class starts late. My personal view, what happens if the system crashes? I am not a fan of telephones or call buttons. I take the view that the rhythm of classroom discussion is so important, and that the old school method works well enough that if something malfunctions, unless a student can immediately say, oh, just hit the such and such button, if you cannot fix it within 30 seconds, it is not worth the disruption to the classroom rhythm to get a solution. Don't invite your wonderful IT people to come in, so for 5 minutes everybody's, well, what's happened to your classroom rhythm? You've lost it. And that's too high a price to pay. So if you've got, say, and I keep dwelling on Uniform Commercial Code, if I don't have to have this screen, I can teach without it. I remember years ago when I did do without it, and I did well. But if they've got their statute books and the screen goes blank, hey, screen goes up, it's old school. You've got your statute books there. Say, look, we're not going to have the screen now, but this is old school. Let's keep talking. And it works. They are flexible. They don't have to have the screen at every moment. It's unfortunate that you might have lost an archive for that class, but that's life. And then solve the problem. The archiving, I'm a strong fan of this wonderful system we have at Opto, where you can search the archive by minute and date, so that this affects on the front end. I'm teaching, we're talking about offer and acceptance, and somebody says, and you've got a student, you'll always have a couple of them there, they got the laptops because they want to get down everything you said. And the student says, that point about it, could you repeat that? Well, now I don't have to. I say, I put in my syllabus, look at the clock. It's 11:23. You know the date, mark it. And then you can go home tonight and you can watch this class and you can advance the video to 11:23 and you can hear it again. And I don't have to, the dynamic becomes less of the stop and start. For the transcription. Now, if the whole class is generally confused and you hear murmuring all over the room because whatever you talk about eluded them, then review it. But it's wonderful, the freedom that the archiving gives you. Reciprocal partnerships, the theme from Boulder last year, who takes the lead? I think that the IT staff should take the lead. And I said this in Boulder and I'll say it again. The biggest problem in the law schools regarding effective teaching and technology is the faculty. Have any of you been treated with disrespect by someone who thinks you are not a partner, but rather a servant? That, unfortunately, don't get me started. But the solution also has to lie with the faculty. The goal we have, the shared goal, is one of engaged teaching, engagement with students. And through effective partnerships with our IT staff, with our librarians, and a faculty that should be receptive to anything that makes them better at what they do, then we should give it our full support. The question of teaching in the law schools, given the incentives which do not support teaching as a central core activity for ambitious faculty, often it is what I call obedience to the unenforceable. You do it because it is right. It is the right thing to do, to teach students in this engaged way and to put the effort into it that it demands. You want to engage students to be part of something larger than themselves. And as a law teacher, I want to thank you for letting me share in your dreams. Thanks.
We have about 5 minutes for questions, if there are any. Yes.
I thought it was very always have a backup plan. If you're going to try new technology, if you have an existing technology and it's solid, just make sure you have it up in queue and ready just in case you need to use it if something does fail. That's one thing we try to encourage our faculty to do. We try to make sure that they feel comfortable with trying something new, but they're also prepared in case something does go wrong, that they can rely on something else. And also, I was very interested in the clicker comments that you had presented. One of the ways also we tried to get our faculty interested in using clickers more is we actually started using them in faculty meetings and for different wrap-back lunches and sessions where they actually were using the clickers from the student's perspective, and it actually sparked some interest. So if you haven't thought about trying that approach, I definitely.
I like that. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Okay.
I need a solution now.
Right. Not later. So
because when they come in and tell me they use a voice thing,
You didn't see the beginning of the
okay, yeah, I did.
it means
You didn't talk more about it. Things are changing. One in marriages. No. Or met.
you have to make a judgment. That's you're asking does it produce more
One is
yeah, I wanted to talk about that. The
empire.
great thing about archiving is it lessons students because they know that they can go back and so that
Show you that.
say just relax. You don't have to write down.
Clinton and Company. Very nice, April. Good job. You too.
So I think
9 course meeting.
maybe it's self-correcting. They will be less inclined to say, can you repeat that? They know.
It was great
They
food
go
though.
back.
It's packet style.
This also gives you an opportunity
9
to
edition.
still work in class. That would be the idea, but you know, something.
Les, tell me about the professor saying, don't even take notes.
Yeah.
Listen, and then go to video.
I don't know if I said that to me, article about that, and taking notes for you. So I started seeing stories.
And that's when you went, I really need an answer.
And she found out what saw it, she was fine. And so she also worked about it. Did I tell you how I found it?
Well, one disagreement we're having, and an interesting question is,
So she comes to me.
I am, and I can be deep, persuade them.
that's the only reason why I'm so
And I give them a week to do it. Then it's put in the archive. Because I want them to review it and not procrastinate. Do a lot of this marathon viewing.
And so,
Then on one of the reading days, I hopefully get to so that if they have last minute questions, they can, because students aren't watching whole things. They're going in and 5 minutes
assigning an attorney, I guess that's what the vendors were talking about.
It's hard to say. It's one of the things I was trying to figure out about mobile technology. Despite my perspective, it's very tragic laws. So she doesn't and you can talk to them about this one or whatever. There's
So.
No, I didn't know this.
And the only reason why I said this is I thorough.
He is in his way.
Right.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yes.
I have been saying that.
in my sense of having a meeting.
Yeah.
Well, that's why which is why I like writing on Beckwith and so yeah.
So I was suspicious of those.
Right.
Numbers to
She was like,
Right, and it's hard to yes. Then it's also aware, okay,
this is all campus records. We've only written a brief.
so are we getting more
long
to
to
the
try.
maybe I say writing is like difficult.
It's not for some.
Yeah, it's always your yeah, a lot of the, yeah, and that's class.
That's awful.
Oh my God.
Are you serious?
I just wish I can't believe that I'm having a
And she's
So, yes.
or in this particular class, there's class.
Yeah, she was where, yeah, she sometimes has to come in and stuff, but it's fine. She emails, that situation's better. I'm in a situation where I can't plug in, there's too much metal on me and lightning, so, yeah. Where that session seems soft, then she then said, everybody should that be but, and that's the kind of thing people expect, so. It hurt. I'm like, really? I don't care. Yeah. No, I mentioned this in the performance of churches there.
So I'm counsel of record. And at one point when she wasn't responding to me, like
How do I
she
get
wasn't
the name?
responding, so I gotta get on that.
We're working on
What's your
That's right.
And she said, well, I'm sorry for your confidence and shaking, blah, 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 but I'm.
Well, students like
let me know if I can find it.
Yeah, I haven't read
And I was like, this girl.
Oh, yeah.
I've got a responsibility. My
Yeah.
If my credibility not good, if you can't do it, I will. Right. I had to break it down.
Especially
I'm not surprised. I was like,
the chase.
it was really nice meeting you. It was nice meeting you too.
Not waste time.
Last night I was one of But to sit here, especially without this, it was skeptical. He was skeptical at first as well. Then he got you too. And he got the paper online. And that came out here to say me. I mean, he was like, I mean, that would be like,
No, but I